This isn't your typical haunted house story, and this definitely isn't a ghost hunt either. What we're about to look at is one of the oldest manors in Lancashire, older than most of the towns that surround it, and depending on who you ask, maybe the most haunted house in England. But forget the ghost stories just for a moment, because behind these walls is a deeper story about religion, repression, lost archives, and a family who just wants a quiet life. This is Chingle Hall, and what you're about to see is the most complete look at its legacy published in years, maybe ever, with aerial footage, rare interviews, and stories reaching out all the way back to the 13th century. We're not here to prove or disprove anything. We came with cameras and not EMF detectors, and we're not here to chase the shadows. But we'd be lying to you if we said this place didn't have a presence about it. Along the way, we found more than we could have possibly expected, from sealed off archives to stories of severed heads buried beneath the earth and whispers that the dead won't rest until they're found. Whatever truth does lie here, it's been waiting a very long time to surface. My name's Lee, and this is a personal project I've been building with my partner. It's a part of a series where we explore eerie, storied places like this one, always with respect and always with curiosity. Chingle Hall has been lived in, loved, and mythologized for nearly 800 years. So let's start from the beginning, not with the ghosts, but with the land itself. The land Chingle Hall sits on has belonged to just a handful of families over the centuries, starting with Uhtred de Singleton all the way back in 1066. It wasn't until the year 1260 that the first real manor house was built here, a small but fortified house surrounded by a full moat dug by Adam de Singleton. The building would later become known as Chingle Hall. Mr. Kirkham, the current owner, told us something incredible. According to British Heritage, the remains of the moat around his property, right here in front of the hall, are some of the best preserved in the entire country. Moat digging historically only happened between 1250 and 1355, so even if everything else was stripped away, the shape of the land itself still remembers. Originally, there would have been a wooden drawbridge across the stretch leading into the front door. Nobody knows exactly when it was replaced, but today you cross the brick-built bridge, maybe the 1800s, maybe earlier. It's little details like this, the things most visitors would overlook, that quietly tell you how old the place really is. Mr. Kirkham's been looking after this property for 30 years. He's dug into the archives, chased lost documents, and pieced together everything he possibly can about the earlier days. According to the Victorian County History of Lancashire, the first time Chingle Hall appears in name is 1354, but that record's been lost, maybe sold off, maybe buried in some private library. But when you live in a place this old, you learn to accept that some stories vanish, but the foundations don't. Most people don't think about who lives in these places now. They only see the ghosts of the past. But Mr. Kirkham has lived here for over 3 decades, not as a caretaker of myths, but as a husband, a father, and yes, a bit of a historian himself. He's trimmed the gardens, patched the stonework, dug into old dusty books, and personally tried to trace every silver of truth in the hall's long history. One of those unknowns is a missing document, a ledger supposedly referenced in the Shyburn abstract book, last seen generations ago at a nearby estate called Negram Hall. Mr. Kirkham searched everywhere, from libraries, colleges and archives. All he found were fragments, copies of copies, notes from previous priests who once lived at the hall. He even wrote a chapter about the property for a local book by the author Janet Rigby. It's called A Journey Through Inglewhite, Whittingham and Goosenow. And then came the line that made us all smile, because he said it to few people over the years. He told me that the paranormal stuff, it's all bullshit. That was made in the 1930s by an old lady who wanted a bit of extra pocket money, he said. Whether you agree or not, you can't help but respect that honesty. And here's the thing, we don't come here to debate, we came here to listen. Before the legends and before the monks and midnight footsteps, this was just a family home. The first was the Singletons, powerful landowners across Lancashire. Around the 1400s, the family was so large that they split across 2 manors. The eldest son took Broughton Tower, and the youngest remained here at Chingle. They spread fast. Mr. Kirkham actually joked that the Singletons bred like rabbits, and the historical record doesn't really argue with him. But it's the Wall family who brought Chingle its darker fame. The 17th century, during a time of brutal religious persecution, the hall became a sanctuary for Catholics, a secret place of worship when practicing mass in England could get you executed. The legend goes, a candle was lit in the porch window when it was safe. When villagers saw the glow shining through the outer wall, they knew mass was able to begin. Inside, hidden priest halls, narrow staircases and tunnels, all built to keep clergy out of sight if the authorities came knocking. This is where the name John Wall comes into the picture, a Catholic priest possibly born at Chingle Hall who became one of the last Englishmen executed for his faith. He was hanged, drawn and quartered in 1679. His body was buried, but it's his head. That part's where the story begins to change. Some say it was taken to France. Others believe that it was actually smuggled back to the hall and buried somewhere on the property, and that if it was ever to be found, the hauntings will stop. He was canonised in 1970, St. John Wall, a martyr of the old world, and for some, the spiritual weight of that never really left. Despite Mr. Kirkham's views, stories persist, and they've persisted for decades. Some say Chingle Hall is the most haunted house in England, but most don't say it for fame. They say it because of what they claim happened to them. In 2006, the BBC actually compiled dozens of local accounts. One of them came from Faye Donovan, who first visited the hall as a child. She remembered seeing a white Scottish terrier in the corner of the Great Hall. No one else saw it, but later the tour guide casually mentioned that a former owner had a white dog. In the chapel, she heard what sounded like monks chanting. In Eleanor Singleton's room, she was asked to sit on the floor and play with the spirit. She declined and felt something tug on her shorts. Another man, Martin, claimed one of his friends began reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards and jumped from a moving car after leaving the hall. He said their vehicle veered towards a tree on its own. Others, like a man named Col Hinchcliffe, never saw anything, but he definitely felt it. Col visited with his parents in the 60s. He made it 3 steps up the staircase before stopping dead. Every hair on his body stood up. He ran out of the building, sick, shaken, and certain something was wrong. That's a reoccurring theme in these stories. Not apparitions, not floating teacups or levitating furniture, but a presence, a shift in the air, a sense that something is watching. One overnight visitor actually kept a log, the kind of hour-by-hour breakdown you make when sleep is impossible. 10 p.m, someone feels another figure standing beside them, but nobody's there. 11:30 p.m, a woman shrieks in the back garden. She says something grabbed her waist. 1 a.m, a bathroom door won't open. It's being held shut from the inside. 4 people hear loud footsteps on wood outside the room, but the hallway floors are covered in rugs. Later, they smelled incense in the chapel, and at dawn, they left quietly, taking only photographs and questions. And I must admit, upon our own visit to Chingle Hall, the air was definitely uneasy here, and at times, it did appear to feel like we were being watched. Could it be just the immense history playing on our minds, or could Chingle Hall hold further secrets yet to be discovered?
We heard footsteps out here in the corridor, and 2 of us came out to see if there was anybody out here. I was stood there, and the other chap was stood there. And in old floorboards, when anybody walks on them, they spring. And these are actually springing. And we watched them, as this invisible entity walked across.
Not every story needs a ghost, but not every ghost story needs to be fiction either. Over the years, scientists and skeptics alike have visited Chingle Hall, trying to explain what's happening here without leaning on the supernatural. One of the most common theories, ley lines, invisible pathways of magnetic or spiritual energy often found beneath old churches, castles and ritual sites. Some believe Chingle Hall sits at a crossing point of 2 such lines. Then, there's the geology beneath the house. Multiple underground fault lines. Some researchers claim that the seismic activity and low-frequency sound waves can trigger sensations of dread, disorientation, or even hallucinations. Microwave radiation, natural gas pockets, even mold spores have all been purposed as causes for the sudden sense of unease people report. Dr. Rooney Dougal, one of the UK's better-known ley line researchers, once said, "When frequencies we aren't normally sensitive to shift in range, the brain can interpret them as something paranormal." In other words, it may not be ghosts, it may be the brain reacting to forces it wasn't designed to handle. And yet, it still doesn't explain the chanting, or the hand on the shoulder, or the dog in the corner. Which brings us to the other theory. Expectation. When you walk into a place known for ghosts, a place labelled as England's most haunted house, what are you already primed to feel? Fear isn't just a reaction, it's a lens. And sometimes it's a mirror. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, it's hard to ignore the weight of history when you step inside Chingle Hall. Of all the stories tied to this place, none is more haunting or more emotionally charged than the one told about Eleanor Singleton. Historical records tell us she was the last of the Singleton family line to live in the hall. She died in 1585. But local legend fills in the rest, with a story that's not just sad, it's deeply disturbing. The tale goes that Eleanor lost both her parents at a young age and was placed under the care of her two uncles. She was allegedly imprisoned in a small upper room of the hall, now called Eleanor's room. What followed, if true, was a lifetime of abuse, trauma, and loss. The legend says that she gave birth to multiple stillborn children and eventually died giving birth to the last, a severely hydrophiliac child within a large skull. Her grief, her rage, her fear, they say all of it is still in that room. And how could you argue that it isn't? Countless people who have entered that room report something they can't explain. Some say they fainted without warning, others break into tears. Visitors describe the smell of lavender, as documented as Eleanor's favourite scent. A few say they feel hands, a presence, a memory pressing in. We're not here to prove whether Eleanor's spirit lingers in that room, but when that many people across that many decades describe the same heavy sadness, maybe it's not about belief, maybe it's just what remains. And for me personally, it's always been about believing in energy. I think there's a lot as humans that we don't understand and we will never understand. And we could all sit down and debate the realities of spirits and entities and demons and religion. What I find hard to ignore is that the energy from love, anger, trauma, hatred, every type of human emotion fills that room. Have you ever walked in a room after an argument and sensed the room to be heavy? Or have you ever returned to a fond home, such as your grandparents' home, and just felt content and happy, even though they've long since passed? This type of energy, or residual energy, holds our memories for decades to pass. And after 800 years, how could this property not hold all of that emotion? Just let that sink in for one moment. 800 years. How many memories could have happened in that building? Or how many memories have happened in that building that we could never possibly know? When you think of it this way, it becomes a lot easier to understand how people who are a little bit more sensitive to these energies can pick up on it and ultimately tell the tale of those before them. We didn't come to Chingle Hall looking for ghosts. We came to listen to its history, to its scars, and to the people who still call it a home. Mr. Kirkham told us that he was tired of the ghost stories, of the myths and the internet rumours, and honestly, we understand why. But we also believe that history doesn't always vanish, and sometimes it echoes. This house has survived wars, fire, plague, and poverty. It's been a sanctuary, a farm, a ruin, a refuge, and now a quiet family home. It's no surprise that after nearly 800 years, some energy might still linger. Whether you call it a memory, or a spirit, or just the weight of time, it's clear that Chingle Hall remembers. And now, maybe so do we. Thank you for watching this documentary and for walking with us through this piece of Lancashire's history. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing for more stories like this about the forgotten, the eerie, and the places that refuse to be erased. Until next time, stay curious, stay respectful, and stay unrested.
Don't put all sorts of bullshit on the internet.
Oh God, no, I won't.
So here I am just approaching the Chingle Hall property for the second time. Just trying to get some better footage. The first time we came here, we were actually approached by the owner. It wasn't planned per se, but we had a nice little chat with him, got a really interesting interview with him actually. A bit of property, a bit of history about the property, and but because it wasn't planned and he came out mid-drone flight, it felt a little bit awkward to get the shots I really needed, specifically down this lane and leading up to the property. Obviously it's been a residential property now for 30 years, closed off to the public. Any paranormal investigators or things such as that are no longer customary around here, so we didn't want to impose ourselves too heavily. But he was really welcoming, he was really friendly.
And this area, like, it's quite nice around here. I think it's quite a private area. Some really nice properties, very old properties. I mean, they're probably all dating back to a similar time period as the Chingle Hall, which was built in 1260 originally. And it's so, you know, we're closing on 800 years at this point of spooky tales and mysteries. Whether or not, you know, you believe in that sort of thing is a different matter, but